And I remember when I came back to London, I was actually interviewing for jobs, and I was sort of just really missed it because I was used to leaving the house every morning. I wasn't used to not working in my adult life. And so the idea of being kind of stuck in my miserable kitchen with like last night's washing up, boiling the kettle, 2 scoops of Nescafe in a mug, and I just kind of thought, actually, I wish we had these New York style coffee bars. So I remember it was the 4th of November, 94, and I'd gone out for a Thai meal with my mum and my brother. And very casually, in this middle of this Thai meal, I said to my brother, God, it's so boring, being stuck in back in my kitchen. I just can't believe we haven't got the New York style coffee bars here. I just wish we had them, because it would be so amazing, because now I'm out of a job. I imagine I could leave the house every morning and go to one of these coffee bars and start my way in this really buzzy way, rather than my miserable sort of kitchen with the washing up. As soon as I said this, my brother Bobby got the old light bulb. We hear about people getting light bulbs, literally, and literally he got a light bulb in the middle of his Thai meal. He said, I can't believe you've said this. There's a company called Starbucks in Seattle. And I'm like, what's Starbucks? He's like, well, Starbucks is a coffee company in Seattle, but they say it's like the new phenomena in America. It's going to eventually grow outside Seattle and then outside America, and it's just going to be a huge coffee craze. And this is it. Now that you've said it, you and I should be the ones to bring American-style coffee bars to the UK. This is like a phenomenal idea. My reaction was, hang on a minute, Bobby, you got me completely wrong. I meant, why didn't someone else open it? And for me to go to it. The whole idea, I just couldn't believe I was the customer. So why did I have to provide a solution to my own problem? I sort of couldn't quite understand that. But that's really what I learned, that the best way actually to be more creative is to actually stand in your customer's shoes. That's actually one of the habits I've got in my book that you're getting a copy of, about being in your customer's shoes, which is so important. So in a way, as an entrepreneur, when you are the customer yourself, you almost become the first customer of your business. And I didn't realize how important that was. Anyway, in this conversation with the restaurant, I'm having none of it. I'm just thinking, well, surely other people open coffee bars, and I'm like the typical customer, so I go to them. This is not me. Anyway, my brother wasn't having any of it, and he was really convinced that this was the idea he wanted to do. So he said, well, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But what if I pay you to do some research for me? And I remember I wasn't being paid at the time. I wasn't getting a salary, so I thought, okay, great, my brother's paying me, fine. And I remember being a very good solicitor. I calculated the quick hourly rate for myself, and I actually got a check from my brother there and then at dinner. Do you remember we used to carry our checkbooks around with us back then, to do 1.5 weeks research for him. And basically got the check, and all I did the next day was, the problem with ideas is apparently we have about sort of 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day just kind of hitting us. And the problem is, those thoughts, especially the great ideas between those thoughts, are very fragile. They're sort of like washing up liquids. They're literally like bubbles. So the problem is, if you've got a great idea about your business, unless you act on it, it literally is washing up liquid. It's sort of completely worthless. So what I did with that very next day is, instead of letting this idea just dissipate in my head, because I know a lot of people had the idea but just didn't act on it, all I did was, the next morning, I walked myself to the nearest tube station on the London Underground. I bought myself a one-day tube pass, and I got on the Circle line. Now, those familiar with London tube system, the Circle line, I figured, well, that's easy. It's got a circle, 27 stops. All I do is that I get off at every single of the stops on the Circle line, putting myself in customers' shoes, literally walking in my customers' shoes. And I remember just kind of getting off, pretending as if I worked in St. James's Park, Baker Street, Aldgate, Liverpool Street, and to see what was on offer. And so as I went up the escalator, off the Underground, I could see that you'd get to, on your way to the office, all you'd have was a greasy spoon sandwich bar. And all they'd have there would be you'd be queuing up, and there'd be these lovely refrigerated units with these tubs of sort of congealed crab mayo, congealed egg mayo first thing in the morning. And all the staff would do when they arrived is they take these congealed tubs and they sort of flip them over, so you got the fresh side, and then that looks fresh, and then that congealed again, and some sort of 1980s style roast beef basically there at the end as well. And these lovely polystyrene cups that are a distant memory for most of us. And so basically I just remember seeing, and I was just seeing these guys were selling so many cups of coffee. And they were selling thousands. You could just see people queuing up for this polystyrene cup. Do you remember that it used to go floppy when the drink was hot? And that foam, you know, you remember the lids that used to always steal the foam off your cappuccino and the cocoa, and you could never sort of drink while you're walking. So I came home that night, and having seen that whole concept in America, I was just convinced that there was a real gap in the market. And if we bring American style coffee bars to the UK, this could make an enormous difference. And really that is the night I became an entrepreneur, which is why my first book's called Anyone Can Do It, because I think we all have an entrepreneur within us. It's just a question of sort of bringing out that entrepreneur. And the other thing I'm going to say as well is that, you know how the sort of brain is, we've got two sort of sides to our brain. The right side, which is the creative side, and the left side, which is the logical fear side. So the right side of my brain is telling me, Sahar, this is phenomenal, what you've seen in New York. If you bring that to the UK, it can make a real difference. There's clearly a real gap in the market for it. It's going to be amazing. But the left side of my brain, which is what I call the fear side of my brain, was telling me, surely, Sahar, there must be something wrong with this picture. Because if it was so amazing, how come no one else has done it? How come no one else has been in this business has done it? You know, you're a lawyer, brother's a banker. I mean, you know, there must be something you're missing out on, because if it was so amazing, someone else would have done it. And what I've learned in life is that whenever you get a new idea, however amazing it is on the right side, you're always going to have that left voice, always. And now with the recession, you know, bless it, we pick up the papers, double dip, whatever, you know, we haven't been through it yet. It's just worse. That voice picks up all that negative news around us. And what I've learned in life is that, you know, we should be very, very conscious of that inner dialogue we're having the whole time. And I genuinely think sometimes, actually, the amount we talk ourselves in this inner dialogue, that if we spoke out loud what we think in our heads, we'd all be labeled insane. You know, thank God we actually keep the conversation quiet to ourselves. And the one thing I've learned is that however amazing ideas, you're always going to get that left voice. And all I've learned to do with the left voice is I've learned to press the delete button on the left voice. Because you don't press delete on your doubts, on your fears, you'll never do anything differently. And the other thing, if you can't press delete, I press mute. You just keep muting it so that it doesn't stop you going forward, and at least enjoying your work and not living in sort of constant fear and panic, you know. Anyway, the next step was, we thought, okay, fine, we're going to do this. Let's just press delete on the left voice and go for this idea, for this what we thought a gap in the market. And we thought, okay, fine. The problem was, normally people start businesses in areas they know. So you would think it's quite natural if you've been in an area, you start a business in the area. But the problem is, well, Bobby and I had absolutely no idea. In a way, all my friends were lawyers, all of Bobby's friends were bankers. So we had absolutely no idea about coffee. So we were clueless about this business we're going to start. So we were clueless about coffee. We were clueless about retail. We were clueless about catering. So we're entirely clueless about this world we're entering. But one of the laws I've got in my book, and I think actually the most important law I've got in both books, I call the importance of being clueless. You see, there's a lot to be said for having your mind uncontaminated by this is how we've always done it before. The danger is, if you've been in a business for too long, you've got to be very aware that, yes, it's great, you've got experience, but that experience can become baggage sometimes, and it can stop you moving forward and expanding your career. And sometimes you just got to, you know, shake off what you know, because with technology, I mean, you guys more than anyone else know, it's changing so fast that how can we possibly apply what we knew ages ago? So there's a lot to be said for having your mind almost uncontaminated by this is how we've always done things, which is how entrepreneurs are. So Bobby and I, we were clueless. I remember we basically had no idea, so we thought, okay, that's fine, but we'll give ourselves 3 months to become world experts on coffee. And at this point, we thought 3 months, okay, the problem is we won't be earning any money, obviously, kind of if we leave our jobs. I'd left already, Bobby would have had to leave his job as well. So we thought, okay, the best solution for that is therefore to move in with my mum. So we basically rented out the flats we were paying mortgages on, moved in with my mum, which was a real shock, moving in with your mum when and your brother, basically, when you've moved out and had careers or whatever. But it worked out great, because obviously you don't have to pay my mum rent at the end of the month, and it was great keeping her company. She recently widowed. And so basically we gave ourselves 3 months to just become world experts on coffee. And I remember people sort of were asking us, do you know anything about Sumatra, Java, you know, that kind of coffee? And we didn't know anything about these coffees. You know, we had no idea what difference between a Brazilian coffee was with a Colombian or whatever. And so I remember the best way for us finding out was we discovered that the big coffee companies had really great training courses that you could really go without committing to buy the coffee. So Lavazza, a really big coffee company, had a great training course. So we sort of pretended as if we were interested in Lavazza coffee, which we weren't. And we went on their training course. And Bobby and I were so enthusiastic to learn all about coffees that without realizing it, we each ended up having 26 espressos in the course of a morning. I don't know if anyone's ever had 26 espressos, it's just that no one had told us on a coffee tasting, you spit it out. You basically don't swallow it as we had done. But, you know, it's just sort of, it's literally like living, breathing the world. You know, you can't afford market research. So getting to know your customer is literally sitting in their world sort of thing. And then I remember the other problem was that I was trying to tell people about what these coffee bars were, but no one really knew what I was talking about, because Café Rouge, if you guys remember, was around that time, but they were sort of more of a cafe, and people thought this was maybe like a sort of posh coffee bar, that kind of. I was like, no, this is a completely different concept. So it was so frustrating trying to explain to people what this was. So I said to my brother Bobby, do you know what, let me go back to New York and I'll take a picture of this New World coffee, and I'll take a picture of how they do everything, how they display their pastries, what the staff look like, and then we'll just come back and copy it. Like that, we can show people what it is, and then it will also give us ideas about what to copy. And Bobby thought, fine. So basically, I remember buying myself a Virgin ticket, £199 ticket to New York, bought myself 3 disposable cameras in Heathrow on my way, and literally as soon as I arrived in JFK, I went straight to this New World Coffee, and I started taking a snap of what the kind of walls looked like, what the staff looked like, everything. So of course, as I'm doing this, I realized the manager is looking at me and getting rather pissed off, because the whole idea was catching on in New York. So she knew exactly what I was up to. So as I was leaving her store, she actually followed me onto the pavement and said, listen, it's really unfair. I know exactly what you've been doing. Please give me back the cameras. It's really unfair. You've been copying our concept. So I was not going to have a scuffle in the middle of New York. So I gave her back the cameras. And I sort of thought, I've just got to find a way. I tried taking a picture from the pavement, but that wasn't really possible. So I did something which entrepreneurs do that I think people don't do enough. And you probably did that at the beginnings of your career. And that is called bootstrapping.